So hello, this is going to be a short demo of what I'm currently working on, which is a 2D scope overhaul for Stalker Anomaly. So I'll try to make this quick, show out some of the features I'm planning to implement, what progress I've made currently, and talk about, you know, general stuff. I'm doing this off the cuff, very limited edits. I have some stuff to do today, but I wanted to present what I'm, yeah, the progress I've made and what I'm working on. So, first thing, the main thing about my work and what I'm planning to do is, well, reworking the 2D scopes overlay for most of the weapons. So in this case, this is an overlay I made for the SV98. Well, as people who have made, textures, it's not that complicated. The thing that I wanted to do differently is that I want a bigger variation on the scope overlays. So if we take, let's say, a weapon which I haven't reworked yet, like I think this one, if there actually that might be a poor choice because I think the scope overlay hasn't been redone. Yeah. So this is from tactical scopes, I believe. And if you take the car 98, it uses a standard scope with other weapons, which means that every time you pick up a weapon that has this scope on it, you have this overlay. What I didn't like about it, it's not like bad scope overlay or anything. It's really that you don't really have a lot of context on the gun you're holding in your hands. Like, you see the scope, sure, you have clear visibility. Yeah, that's right. But the thing I really wanted to do is that when I want someone to aim down a scope, I want them to feel as if they were actually aiming down that weapon's scope. So I'm really reworking most overlay to actually work with um, a lot bigger variation of scope overlays. So this is the Remington 700 from Baz, and as you can see here, the scope overlay, it's you can actually see the weapon at the bottom, and the scope itself has well, the usual scope crosshair, and it works like, well, most scope overlays. Difference here, you can actually see the arm of the guy who's actually manipulating the gun. Um, and if we take a different weapon, which would be this one here, this is the Remington 700 Magpul Pro. This has the actually normally this would have the same scope overlay as the previous one, but in this case, since the weapon looks kind of different from the other one, I want to make a separate scope overlay for this weapon. So if you aim down sight, you can kind of see that the scope overlay is slightly different because of the perspective you have while aiming the gun. So this here is a, well, fine example. It's not that different, but when you come to like more early game weapons, like let's say the Mosin and the SVT, uh, both of these weapons actually use the same PU scope. In original Anomaly, the problem was that um, this scope overlay had to be standard between the Mosin and the SVT. Both had to use the same scope overlay. However, well, an SVT doesn't look anything like a Mosin. So what I wanted to do was to actually rework both to have different scope textures. So if you aim down sight with a Mosin Nagant, you actually see a Mosin Nagant. You're actually, it feels like it's as if you were actually aiming the thing. But if you would take the SVT in Vanilla Anomaly and you were to aim down sights, normally you would see this overlay that I showed you before, which would be the Mosin Nagant overlay. So I had to rework some of the config files for the weapons, but now when you aim the SVT, you actually have an overlay that looks like the overlay of an SVT, what you would see if you were aiming down sights of an SVT. This works with multiple other weapons. I'm starting work on the Type 63 and on the SKS. It's just I haven't figured out the entire thing. I've worked also with other weapons, like I've reworked the SR25. So as you can see, the scope overlay is again different. And normally this scope overlay is standard with the Remington 700 I've shown earlier. This would have had the same scope overlay as the other ones. So I'm really adding a lot of variation in the 2D scope overlays. So there's really a lot more of them, and it's so that it feels a bit more immersive. Um, Another feature I wanted to add is that since when you aim outside with a Mosin, you can see the bolt of the bolt action really clearly. I didn't like that when you were shooting, it felt as if you weren't actually operating the bolt. So I've included a script that when you fire the gun, you unscope automatically the gun to manually operate the bolt. This has the effect of making bolt action rifles a lot less potent in close quarters, and it also has the side effect of making them less usable also in CQC, because now every time you shoot you have to unscope, rescope, blah blah blah. As part of the overhaul too, I've always found that um, in my play style and the way I wanted to play the game, scope overlays like uh, this one from the car are super clear. Like you can really see well what's within it, and if you set up even like with the scope fog, you can actually even use this like as a red dot sight almost, because of how clear the scope is, how much zoom variation there's on it, and even if you move, there's no like fog obscuring the sights in any way. It's really powerful. It's really great. But scopes and anomaly, in my opinion, would deserve to be well, I think nerf is a good word for it, but they would need to match a better niche, which would be to engage at longer range. So, as part of the way I'm treating scopes, scope, as you can see, this is probably like this one of the smallest scopes I have, but the Mosin Nagant's scope is actually really small, so that it really feels as if you were aiming down a tunnel. And in this case, since the Mosin is one of the starter weapons, I think it's fair to have it with a very small, well, side picture. And this makes the gun actually a lot more difficult to use, and it make it also really perform its role as a sniper rifle. You don't want to be using this while in CQC. As I said also, since the goal is to make this less usable in CQC, you can actually, kind of see the guys in the context out of the scopes. But when you move with shader driven scopes, if you move your aim, it works fine. It kind of hides a bit if you're trying to do very fast flicks, and it makes it less usable in CQC, but still possible. However, as I said, if you move, your sight is completely obscured. So that's part of the settings I will recommend. They won't be mandatory, of course. I want to make this as modular as I can, but the idea would be that making this would make scopes a lot less useful in CQC. So if you want to use a Mosin Nagant in CQC, well, solution is simply don't use a scope. Scopes aren't made to be usable in CQC in very close quarters, especially these old scopes that have um, a very difficult point to aim at them and try to have a clear side pictures. I'm not sure how much of it is realistic on this aspect, but in my point of view, this is more of a gameplay balance kind of thing. So this is why I'm pushing for something like this. If you don't like it, as I said, there's no obligation to actually use this kind of feature. This can be very easily changed from a console command kind of point. You can just simply not implement it. It's a game you want to play after all. I'm just making it available because to my taste, this is what I wanted. So basically, that's what I'm doing. Other examples of, oh yeah, one last feature I wanted to show, and these would be the best two ones to show. Normally, these two weapons actually use a pipscope from Baz. And in this case, pipscopes are, difficult to run because of the engine itself. And I actually wanted to avoid that because, in my opinion, the engine impact is just too great to warrant the use of pipscopes. So what I did is I simply changed those scopes to be 2D scopes overlays. So this is the one I made for the AK5. And as you can see, well, this obscures the vision very a lot. So if you actually want to use it in CQC, just switch to the red dot sides. So this makes, as I said, the feature I was implementing actually makes hybrid and canted sights from Baz, which are like the super tactical and cool stuff that doesn't seem actually very useful without this kind of feature actually implemented and make these rifles um essentially super versatile. If you want to shoot from far, you've got a scopes, and if you want to shoot from close up, well, you've got a red dot sight. So yeah, it really makes these tactical guns a more end game choices and reflects, in my opinion, better the progression we want to achieve. Well, I wanted to achieve at least. Same thing for the AUG, so the Steyr. If we go to the Shire, normally this uses a 2D, well, no, not a 2D, a pip scope, but in my case, it's adjusted and now you actually have a 2D scope overlay. In the best case, I think there's no backup sites usage normally. I might be wrong, maybe I messed up something in the config file, but I'll need to check that. And the overlay is also standard with the basic OG, which I cannot find currently. There it is. So it uses the same thing right here. And this one has the backup side. So you see this normally would be a 3D scopes. You can actually see the hole from the scope in there. I just simply changed it to actually use a 2D overlay because I prefer 2D overlays with this kind of look over 3D overlays with um, well, I just don't like how they're treated in Anomaly. So yeah, so that's basically a very fast rundown of the features. I had to keep this video under 15 minutes because of um, YouTube restraints, but that's what I'm planning to do, and it's gonna take at least a very long while to make this all work. Because there's a lot of job to do, but I've got a lot of overlays already done. I just want to implement them in the game. It's just that I haven't had time to do it actually in the in the game engine because it needs a lot of tampering just to add scopes in. And my specialty is mostly photoshopping them. So yeah, so that's the basic idea. Let me know what you think. Just write in comments. You can write me on Discord. I think my username is the same thing. I'm in the Anomaly Discord and Yo's Discord, a couple of the Discords in the Anomaly community. So yeah, all right. I hope you like it. If it's to your taste, well, when it's done, I'll just make sure to say that it's uploaded. You can check it out, test it out. I have a couple of things also I want to check because the overlays are now in 1080p instead of the stretched texture, and that might cause issue with other resolutions, which I need to test. So if you have like a non 1080p monitor, 4K or even 2K, just let me know and we can maybe I can send you some of the test files just to see if they actually overlay correctly on your screen. So, all right, see you next time.